The Great Lakes, 5 massive inland bodies of water, covering over 94,000 square miles of land and containing over 1/5 of the world's fresh water, serving an entire region of the continent with its water supply, providing drinking water for over 40 million, and turning the area into a top agricultural region in the country. Today I traveled to Green Bay, Wisconsin to see and experience one of these cities. I think there's a big difference between cities on major ocean coastlines and cities on the Great Lakes. I don't see as much hustle and bustle here as I would somewhere on the East Coast. And I can't stress enough how different a city like Green Bay is to a city like New London, Connecticut. There aren't as many crazy busy ports. In fact, Duluth Superior is the busiest port on any Great Lake, and that's ranked just 26th. It's just a very different type of region, and I mean that in a great way. So today I wanted to talk about these Great Lakes, and specifically talk about which lake has the highest population living on the coast, going in order of population and into detail on specific cities and areas. Before I get into that though, I wanted to quickly ask if you would please consider subscribing to the channel. I make geography content like this every week, so if that's the type of thing you enjoy watching, please consider clicking that subscribe button so you don't miss any future uploads. Thank you. So to calculate these statistics, I added up the population of any coastal city on each lake, with any major city having the entire metropolitan area counted. Any number is approximate, and I did the best I could. So with that, we start with the Great Lake that holds the least population on its coast, which is Lake Superior. So Lake Superior holds a lot of prestigious titles. It's the largest lake, not only in the Great Lakes, but also the entire world, at 31,700 square miles, holding 10% of the world's fresh water. It's the deepest, coldest, and clearest Great Lake, also making a claim for having the best overall scenic beauty. In regards to cities, the largest city is Thunder Bay, Ontario, with a population of 110,000, but the Duluth Superior metro area has around 291,000 residents. On the other end of the lake, there's Sault Ste. Marie, which has a total area population just under 100,000. The biggest city just in Michigan is Marquette, which has a population just over 20,000. And another city with a decent population is Ashland, Wisconsin. Apart from that, their coastline is fairly empty, especially in Ontario, where there's well over 200 miles between real towns. And even past that, there's really not much going on besides Thunder Bay. On the US side, the coast is built up of mostly declining northern cities. Duluth has a stagnant population, Ashland is declining, and really the entire upper peninsula of Michigan is losing population. Anyway, all of this total adds up to a population of 363,000, which is the least of any Great Lake. Moving on, next we have Lake Huron, the only other lake without a major city built on it. I personally expected this population to be the lowest, but the south half has a much more favorable coastline, which bumps the number up. The biggest metropolitan area seems to be Bay City, Michigan, which has a population around 108,000. But Sarnia, Port Huron is right around that range above 100,000 as well. Apart from that, we move up to the north where I personally counted the Sault Ste. Marie metro as well, which is another city around 100,000. But that's really it for decently sized cities. Now looking on the Ontario side of things, I think these cities bump the number up a lot. There are plenty of overlooked cities and towns with population around 7,000 to 20,000, which really makes a difference in passing Lake Superior. Places like Owen Sound, Collingwood, and Midland all have over 15,000 residents. Apart from that, the north is yet again fairly unpopulated. There are communities like Alpena, Mackinac City, and St. Ignace, and some of the islands have decent populations, which I counted. Places like Mackinac Island, Drummond Island, and Manitoulin Island are all beautiful areas. Anyway, the total population adds up to around 500,000, putting it in 4th place. Next up, we move to 3rd place, which is Lake Erie. So this is where the population suddenly jumps. I'll start by saying I didn't count the Detroit metro in my statistics. So the biggest metropolitan area ends up being Cleveland, Ohio, which has over 2 million people. There's also Buffalo, New York, which is home to 1.1 million, Toledo, Ohio, which has 600,000, and Erie, Pennsylvania, which has 270,000. There's also cities like Sandusky, Ohio, and Monroe, Michigan. All of these come together to make a large total on the US side of things. But the Canadian coastline is actually less populated than you'd expect. There's Leamington, which is home to around 27,000, but apart from that, it's really just rural farmland with small towns until you get to the Buffalo metro. There are a few interesting things for this lake. It's the shallowest of any Great Lake by a long shot. It has a cool chain of islands in Ohio and Ontario, and the coast is home to Cedar Point, a major theme park. Going back to population though, this all adds up for a big jump to 4.3 million residents on the coastline. Moving on, we go to our second place lake, which is Lake Ontario. Now this one is a bit of a different situation. So far, the Canadian side hasn't been the main contributor carrying the population statistic. As I'm sure you can guess, this is where that changes, because by far the biggest city on Lake Ontario would be Greater Toronto, home to cities like Mississauga, Markham, Vaughan, Oakville, and Oshawa. This entire metro area adds up to 5.9 million. If you calculate it differently, it could be as high as 9.8 million, making it the fourth largest metro in North America. We count it as 5.9 though. Next there's Rochester, New York, which is home to just over 1 million. There's Hamilton, Ontario, which has around 785,000, and there's St. Catharines, with 140,000. Moving to the northeast end of the massive lake, we have Kingston, Ontario, which comes in at 136,000. Now looking at where the population is, you obviously look at the Canadian side of the western half of this lake. Starting from the border, there's basically an 125-mile stretch of coastline that is covered by city, whether that be in the massive city of Toronto or the overlooked cities of Hamilton and St. Catharines, which are both very large cities. This whole urban region seems to be connecting to form an extended Toronto-Buffalo metro, which I think isn't realized by most. On the opposite side of things, though, the stretch between Rochester and Kingston is very underpopulated, and it's a lot of rural woodland. A few interesting things: Lake Ontario is the most eastern Great Lake, also being the smallest Great Lake. Despite that though, it's still the 14th largest lake in the world. Moving swiftly back to our population, Lake Ontario is home to around 8 million coastal residents. Now moving to our obvious first place lake, we have the Great Lake Michigan. So Lake Michigan is home to the highest population of any Great Lake. And I've also found that it has the most decently sized towns that were worth counting in my statistics. Now starting with obviously the focal point of the population, we have the Chicago Metro. This metropolitan area alone accounts for 79% of the lake's population. And without it, Lake Michigan would move down to the third place spot, below Ontario and Erie. So Chicago has 9.4 million residents, making it the biggest city on the Great Lakes. Moving to the north, Milwaukee has a metropolitan area of 1.6 million. Next is Green Bay Metro with 320,000, Racine with 76,000, Sheboygan with 50,000, and all of these are in Wisconsin. Michigan has Muskegon, Traverse City, and Benton Harbor, but don't have a major population right on the lake overall. The lake is great for tourism, with areas like Door County, the UP, and Leelanau County all attracting lots of visitors every year. It's a very interesting, unique, and beautiful lake, located entirely within the United States, with a total population that sits at 11.9 million. Green Bay is a wonderful city. It's growing, it's affordable, it's safe, and you have a freshwater inland sea the size of England, 10 minutes away from you. Growing up in the Midwest, I do have a soft spot, but I genuinely think that these are some amazing cities and are really overlooked. Thanks for watching. Thank you to the members this week: Makita Martinoff, Kurt Ainsley, Yoshifu, Jerome McCall, Haystack, KMS162, JL, Sir JC17, Bryson, Dominic Psyche, Rosebud 4, Jeremy Jarvis, Christopher DeAngelis, Darkbird, Big Pasty, Jeremy Crone, Wolfling73, Snyder Schwein, Florida Jake, Benjamin Whiting, Ryan Devins, and Haas of the Wolf. I appreciate you all so much. If you want to become a member, the link is down in the description below. It's just a way to help me out if you want to support the channel. Thank you.